Okay, let's go with this one. Kurt Von Arnold says, how do I reconcile my belief that free market capitalism is an absolute good, lifting more people out of poverty than any other system, with my desire to protect the jobs and livelihoods of my fellow citizens from competing markets that are destroying them? And I assume he means overseas markets, although certainly it's possible to lose your job to domestic competition as well. Well, first of all, we have to understand that as much as I love this country and as much as I love capitalism, and I sure do love them both, I don't believe that we've ever had free market capitalism in America. There's a remarkable book. I've interviewed the author of it a couple times on PJTV. I highly recommend it. I'm embarrassed I don't have his name in front of me, but I do remember the book, and it's called The Myth of the Robber Barons. If you go look at The Myth of the Robber Barons, what that will show you is that all throughout the history of capitalism in America, which is the example and the model for capitalism and wealth generation throughout the world, what you find is that there were two different kinds of people, and the author of this book, who hopefully somebody will be able to provide me with in a minute here, was very, very clear on this, and he put them in a way I'd never thought of him before, but it's a very, very illuminating and insightful way to think of things. Bert Folsom, thank you, Wild Goose. Bert Folsom said that there were two kinds of entrepreneurs during the age of the so-called robber barons who weren't really robber barons. He said they were political entrepreneurs and market entrepreneurs. And political entrepreneurs were people who, like Robert Fulton, who invented the steamboat, and then he basically went to the government, in that case it was a state government in New York, and said, hey, I've got a steamboat, and how about if you license me and legally say I'm the only guy who can run a steamboat up and down this route on these rivers in New York, and in exchange for this license, I will pay you a percentage of the fares. And the same thing was true with the sorry, I almost did it. I caught myself. The president didn't, but I did. The Transcontinental Railroad, same thing was true with that, where the Union Pacific and the Union Pacific and Western Pacific were fighting to meet in the middle of the country, and they were getting enormous subsidies from the government. But along comes a guy, back to the steamboat, for example, along comes Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was in fact a market entrepreneur, looked at the collusion between government and business that Fulton had, and basically said, well, I'm locked out of competing with this guy. I don't have the subsidies from the government, so I'm going to have to carry more passengers, which means I'm going to have to charge a lower rate, and that means I'm going to have to be far more efficient. Vanderbilt then took that attitude later into the transatlantic trade, because the British had subsidized the mail route from Britain to America with canard lines. We had a subsidized route ourselves. And basically, Vanderbilt said, I'm going to carry mail for free, and I'm going to cut the transatlantic fares by a factor of 90%. And what ended up happening was everybody got to ride, and he made more money, and he put the subsidized guys out of business because he appealed to the people. It was a Great Northern Railroad, was the one that James J. Hill built. Thanks, Dave Olson. Another example of a guy who used his own money. And in the case of Vanderbilt using his own money, Hill using his own money, and all of these market entrepreneurs who use their own money, they provided better service and better quality and better safety because they had to. Since they were using their own money, the railroad that James Hill built, and the Great Northern, for example, was laid out far more efficiently than the ones that the two big government-sponsored railroads were, because the government-sponsored railroads understood that the market was from the government. So the faster they could put track down, the more money they got, the more land grants they got. That meant they didn't have to be very efficient in terms of the surveying, didn't have to be very efficient in terms of the quality of the rail. But when they were laying down the private railroad, he had to make it absolutely as level as he could. He had to make the grades as low as he could. He had to use the highest quality rails that he could. And because he built a much better railroad technologically, I mean to say, he was able to charge a lower rate. And that lower rate meant that he could outcompete the guys even with a subsidy. And finally, the guys with the subsidy offered to pay him a huge part of the subsidy to get out of business. Did the same thing again and again and again, all over the board. So please read Myth of the Robber Barons by Folsom, Dr. Folsom, because it really explains this for you, Kurt. And I want to get into it a little bit more. To say simply this: when a person loses their job under the ideal free market, one of two things is happening. they're losing their job to a company that is out competing them. They're just selling better widgets or better cars or it's a better restaurant. If think about this, nobody really talks about this. I can't remember if this was in Dr. Folsom's book or not, but if you have two restaurants on the same block and one of them is just jammed all the time and you can't get in and the other one's going out of business, why is that? It's the same location, it's the same clientele, same customers, same neighborhood. Somebody's doing an awful lot better job of providing a service than the other guy. And they're succeeding and people are voting with their wallets and with their feet. So, generally speaking, when you have the ability to compete freely, losing a job to competition means the market is growing. It means that business is growing, and people who are fired don't normally get executed. This business about allowing GM to go bankrupt, that Romney got into such trouble for. People talked about Romney saying this as if Romney meant, let's allow GM to go bankrupt, which means we'll bulldoze all the factories down and we'll line all the people up and push them over a cliff. That's not what he was talking about at all. He was talking about bankruptcy as a legal declaration, which meant that he could renegotiate contracts. So it allowed him to renegotiate a contract at a better rate. So when you talk about friends losing jobs to competition, that actually is good for everybody. Competition lowers the rates for everybody, makes everything less expensive. This cell phone costs what it costs, not because Apple's kindness. This cell phone costs what it costs because the Apple iPhone is priced because of Samsung. If Samsung wasn't there, then they could charge whatever they want for this thing. So competition actually helps people, helps everybody's lives by lowering prices across the board and raising quality at the same time. When you get the government involved in this process, you don't have capitalism anymore, or free market capitalism as we understand it. We have what's often called crony capitalism, which we shouldn't use because there's no capitalism as far as we're concerned. People just taint the term. The correct term for that is mercantilism. That's where the government basically takes money from big companies. They use that money to get elected. Once elected, they write laws that keep the competition away from those big companies. And GM doesn't have to compete because GM is legally protected. And that goes all the way down to little things like a hairstylist and their license. Have you ever gotten to somebody for a haircut? Have you ever gone to a hairdresser or gotten a haircut based on the certificate on the wall? Have you ever gone and said, I've heard that the Davidson School of Cosmetology is the best school there is. Which school did you go to? No one does that. Everybody gets a personal recommendation from friends. This guy's really good. And things like licenses like that keep competition out of the market, which is why the people in business like it. The governments like it because it gives them more power, and they like power, and it gives them licensing fees and fines, both of which they like. So there's that kind of competition. And I think the displacement caused by that kind of competition is a temporary displacement. But there's also the competition, the loss of jobs that you were referring to there, Kurt, that comes about from people losing their jobs because of entire sectors moving overseas. If a business moves overseas, that's one thing. If a sector moves overseas, that's something else. Manufacturing, for example. Manufacturing is an interesting example, which I'll come back to in just a quick moment. But the classic example, of course, is, what do you do to protect the job of the baleen hoop skirt manufacturers and the horse and carriage buggy whip manufacturers? How do you protect their jobs? You don't. You don't protect their jobs. Those people are going to lose their jobs because those entire sectors are going away and they're not coming back. Those people need to be retrained, and as the world moves up, then people get better jobs. If a person had manufactured buggy whips at the beginning of their career and moved into a job, let's say repairing televisions, they probably made more money repairing televisions than they did repairing buggy whips. So even though you have to train people again, and there's displacement and insecurity and stress, and believe me, if anybody understands that, you're talking to this guy, because I've been living my life as a gig-based life for 40 years now, and I know what it's like to not know where the next paycheck's coming from. That's virtually my entire life. I get the stress of it. I do. But when you have entire sectors leaving, it may be time to be looking for not just a different job, but a different line of work, a better line of work. And the final thing I'll say about sectors and entire industries disappearing is that sometimes they can come back. And as I mentioned in that last Afterburner, Gulliver Unbound, when you are talking about manufacturing leaving the country, which it largely has done. And manufacturing is a good thing to have for a country, because in the industrial era, with the assembly line, you don't have to teach a person how to build a car. You only have to teach a person how to put the steering wheel on the steering column. That's all you have to do. So it allows people to with a relatively simple education, a relatively low IQ, it allows people to have a decent living. So when that thing leaves, then it's almost impossible for it to come back. So let's talk about why. When manufacturing leaves America, it's because Nike, I'll just pull them out of the air. Nike wants to sell shoes. Nike knows, as everybody else who's ever been in business knows, that there is a sweet spot, which is a price point at which point you will make the most money. In other words, if I've got a pair of Nike track shoes and they cost me, let's say, $5, and I sell them for $6, I'll sell masses of shoes and I'll make a certain amount of money. If they cost me $5 and I sell them for $500, I'll sell far, far fewer shoes. I'll make more money per sale. But somewhere in there is a number, which is probably around $85, $90, $100, whatever nowadays, something insane like that. There's a price point where you will make the most amount of money per unit of sale. That's that price sweet spot. And every business is looking for that sweet spot, because that's how you stay alive. Profit margins in business are so narrow. Most people who hate businesses do not understand that, they're making 40% profit. Are you kidding? Most businesses don't make 1%, 2% profit. Airlines are making, I think I saw a breakdown that said they're making like 16, 17 cents per seat, per trip. Something, profit. It's insane. Okay, so manufacturing leaves America because if I'm going to make a pair of Nike shoes and it costs $5 to make them in America, and I can make them in China for $2 or $1 because Chinese workers will work for less than American workers, then that means that I can still sell them at that sweet spot, that price point, but I'll get to take more of it back into the company. So it's worth it to make the move. In other words, cheap labor in manufacturing is an enormously powerful incentive, and a country that has expensive manufacturing and is making the same pair of shoes as a country that has inexpensive labor, that company with the expensive labor is going to go out of business, all other things being equal. But. As it turns out, raw materials are commodities sold on the world market, so they're more or less, there's transportation costs and all these other things, but they're more or less stable. So really what you have when you make a widget like a pair of shoes is you've got two things. You've got the cost of the labor, which is cheaper overseas, and you've got the cost of the energy, which is cheaper here. You also have the cost of regulation and taxes, which used to be cheaper here, but now is cheaper over there. So if you make the taxes and the regulations lower, you can do that with the swipe of a pen. You automatically tilt the table of manufacturing back this way. And if you throw in cheap and abundant energy through things like fracking, natural gas, atomic power, and all these other things, you can actually get manufacturing jobs back from Asia, where they've got unlimited cheap labor, and Africa and South America. You can get all those jobs back in America, but you need to use your energy advantage. We got to have cheaper energy to make those shoes competitive with the cheap labor, and we have to get these regulations and taxes not eliminated but under control so that we can bring these jobs back to America. And it's not so bloody hard to figure out, honestly. They're not interested in it. They say they are, but they're not. When Barack Obama was campaigning before he was ever elected, all you need to know about Barack Obama is, Mr. Obama, what if we told you that lowering taxes raised revenues? Well, I don't believe that's true. Mr. Obama, just as a thought experiment, what if we told you that by lowering taxes, we raised revenues, which meant that you had more money for the government to spend on poor people? He wouldn't do it. He said, no, the income inequality is the bigger issue. So you poor people out there can pound sand. The main thing is sticking it to the people who are successful. So it's not like they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to figure it out. Of course they know how to figure it out. They just don't want to. They just don't like it. So anyway, that's that.